until it saved an entire convoy from U-boats. 8 U-boats, 54 ships, one radio man who could save them all, or fail. The North Atlantic, in February of 1943, was a place of relentless danger. Winter storms lashed the sea. Towering waves struck steel hulls with unyielding force, and darkness fell early, shrouding the convoys in a nearly impenetrable black. For the Allied forces, every day that a merchant convoy managed to cross from North America to Britain intact meant more than just supplies. It meant the fragile survival of the British war effort, the ongoing production of aircraft and tanks, and the very sustenance of millions of civilians and soldiers. The German Kriegsmarine knew this, and the U-boat fleets were tasked with making those lifelines disappear. Among these lifelines was convoy HX-229, consisting of 54 merchant ships carrying ammunition, food, fuel, and medical supplies. They were escorted by a handful of destroyers, corvettes, and other small warships, tasked with keeping them safe from the ever-present threat beneath the waves. One such escort was the aging American destroyer USS Hawthorne, a vessel commissioned prior to the war but upgraded hastily with improved sonar systems, primitive radar, and depth-charge racks in an effort to keep up with the lethal advances of the Kriegsmarine. Aboard the Hawthorne was Radioman Second Class Elias Warren, a young sailor barely 21, but with a remarkable talent for interpreting radio signals and identifying patterns in seemingly meaningless static. His days were spent hunched over a radio console, listening for the faintest signs of German communication. At this stage in the war, Germany relied on short, encrypted Morse bursts to coordinate U-boat movements, and radiomen like Elias had become an indispensable part of Allied intelligence, often tasked with anticipating attacks before any physical evidence appeared. The night of February 19th brought the kind of darkness that felt almost alive. Heavy clouds blocked the moonlight, and icy winds drove spray across the deck. The Hawthorne cut through the waves with a low hum, her crew maintaining tight formations and strict radio silence except for essential commands. Elias sat alone in the radio room, headphones pressed to his ears, eyes scanning meters, listening to the rhythmic hiss of static that had become the soundtrack of his life. It was then, at exactly 23:17, that the unusual happened. A faint Morse code signal emerged from the static. It was short, clipped, almost drowned by atmospheric interference, but undistinguishably artificial. Elias recognized the structure instantly. Curt signal, the compressed short messages used by U-boats to coordinate without giving away their positions. At first, he thought it might be interference, but his training told him otherwise. The signal was too deliberate, too patterned to be random. Then came another, and another. 3 separate transmissions, each with a unique rhythmic signature. Experienced radiomen could differentiate operators by speed, spacing, and subtle differences in the transmission style. Elias identified each immediately. This was no mere coincidence. A wolf pack was forming. A coordinated attack on convoy HX-229 was imminent. Elias grabbed his decoding pad and began logging the signal strengths and approximate bearings. But the radio equipment aboard the Hawthorne, though upgraded, was still limited. Triangulation was impossible from a single destroyer, and any official report to the convoy commander would take too long. Protocol dictated that he wait, document, and verify, but Elias knew that such delay could cost lives. Dozens of ships, thousands of sailors, and millions of dollars of critical cargo. He needed to amplify the signals. In a corner of the radio room lay a coil of emergency antenna wire, reserved for catastrophic communication failures. Next to it was a crude amplifier, an unauthorized assembly of vacuum tubes, copper coils, and various electrical components borrowed from the radar room. It had never been approved, tested, or even cleared for use, but Elias had built it for situations just like this. Without hesitation, he connected the wire to the amplifier, carrying it to a porthole overlooking the black, churning Atlantic. He took a deep breath, opened the hatch, and let the wire trail into the freezing water. Salt spray stung his face, and the metallic line thrashed with each wave, but almost immediately the radio came alive. The faint German signal sharpened, and he could now map their relative positions with unprecedented clarity. Elias's heart pounded as he realized the scale of the threat. It was not 3 U-boats as he had initially suspected, but 8, positioned in a broad semicircle around the convoy. They were following a classic Rudeltaktik, the Wolfpack tactic designed to trap and overwhelm escorted convoys. Any deviation from the current course would be too late. The attack was imminent. Without waiting for approval, Elias sprinted to the bridge. The captain, Lieutenant Commander Harold Atwood, a man renowned for strict adherence to protocol and discipline, looked up as the young radio man burst in, breathless. "Sir, Wolfpack inbound. 8 U-boats. They're closing in fast," Elias reported. The Atmo, a mixture of disbelief and concern. "You rigged equipment without authorization? You know that's a court-martial offense." "Yes, sir, but I'm right." The captain studied him for a moment. Then, with a deep exhale, he nodded. Sound general quarters. Chaos erupted across the ship as sailors scrambled to their stations. Sonar operators switched to active scanning. Gun crews loaded Oerlikons, and depth charge racks were armed. Other escort ships received the urgent message and moved to tighten the defensive perimeter around the convoy. Every movement was coordinated with precision honed from months of Atlantic crossings. At 23:42, sonar detected the first unmistakable contact. A U-boat at periscope depth, closing in on a tanker carrying aviation fuel. Moments later, a white streak sliced through the water. A torpedo. The Hawthorne pivoted violently, engines roaring, bow slamming through the waves. Depth charges thundered as they launched into the sea, sinking for seconds before exploding with shattering force. The ocean erupted in boiling water, foam, and oil, as one of the enemy submarines was destroyed. But the battle was far from over. Multiple torpedo trails appeared, periscopes broke the surface, and the escorts zigzagged in coordinated maneuvers. Hedgehog anti-submarine mortars fired in rapid bursts, exploding only on contact. Radar operators tracked targets while the destroyers maintained a defensive screen around the convoy. For nearly an hour, the ocean became a theater of tension, steel, and unrelenting fear. By dawn, the Atlantic fell silent. The convoy emerged largely unscathed. Not a single merchant vessel was lost. 2 U-boats were destroyed, several damaged, and the Wolfpack had withdrawn in disarray. The convoy commander later remarked that whoever had anticipated the attack and acted swiftly had saved them all. The captain of the Hawthorne confirmed it. "It was my radio man. He broke every rule and saved us." The improvised wet wire technique, previously banned, became quietly incorporated into Allied emergency protocols. Naval historians would later document how this method and the courage of individuals like Elias Warren ensured the survival of critical convoys, turning the tide in the Atlantic. The first light of dawn crept across the Atlantic horizon, turning the endless waves into muted shades of gray. The wind had softened slightly, but the sea still heaved violently, as if mourning the violence that had taken place hours before. For the men aboard the convoy ships, the night's events were fresh in memory. Every creak of timber,
every burst of sonar, every depth-charge detonation burned in their minds. Many had barely slept, their eyes scanning the dark waves long after the last echo of battle faded. On the bridge of the USS Hawthorne, Lieutenant Commander Harold Atwood surveyed the horizon with a mix of relief and lingering anxiety. Around him, the crew moved with a strange calm, the adrenaline of combat slowly giving way to exhaustion. They had survived a wolf-pack attack that could have decimated the convoy, and yet the young radioman who had predicted it, the one who had broken every protocol, was nowhere near recognition. Elias Warren, still pale from the night's exertions, sat quietly in the radio room, headphones discarded, staring at the coils of wire he had used to amplify the signals. It was as if he hadn't slept in days, and in a sense, he hadn't. His mind replayed every Morse burst, every shadow moving beneath the waves. Across the convoy, the merchant ships were beginning to regroup. Sailors from smaller cargo vessels cautiously climbed the decks, peering into the foggy distance. Some whispered tales of seeing torpedo streaks or the eerie silhouettes of periscopes just beneath the surface. But the vast majority were relieved, astonished even, that their cargoes had survived the night without loss. The war was far from over, yet for this single crossing, fortune had favored them. As the Hawthorne sonar operator monitored the surrounding waters, faint echoes still bounced off submerged hulls, remnants of the U-boats that had withdrawn into deeper currents. The Wolfpack had not been entirely destroyed. 2 of their number had escaped damage, retreating to report back to command. But the coordinated defense, guided in large part by Elias's unconventional radio tactics, had ensured that none of the convoy's vessels had been hit. This was no small feat. By February 1943, the Battle of the Atlantic had already claimed thousands of lives and countless tons of essential cargo. Every convoy that arrived safely was a lifeline to the Allied war effort. The day's operations began with routine assessments and minor repairs. Crew members inspected damage to the Hawthorne, recalibrated depth-charge mechanisms, and checked radar and sonar systems. The psychological toll, however, was harder to measure. Every sailor carried the memory of the night like an invisible weight, the constant uncertainty of whether a torpedo could strike at any moment, leaving them tense even as the sun rose. Officers circulated among the men, offering brief encouragements, reminding them that their survival was a testament to their training and courage. Meanwhile, in the radio room, Elias continued his vigil, not out of obligation, but from instinct. The improvised amplifier remained connected to the emergency antenna wire trailing in the frigid water. And even during daylight hours, he could pick up faint signals from distant submarines. He carefully logged each pulse, each signal variation, noting possible Wolfpack coordination. The work was meticulous, painstaking, and dangerous, but it provided critical intelligence that the convoy commander used to adjust formation and routing. Each entry Elias made could potentially prevent disaster in the hours ahead. By mid-morning, the convoy had traversed approximately 20 more nautical miles. The sun now reflected weakly off the crests of the waves, casting a pale, silvery light over the scattered vessels. Despite the clear skies above, the threat below had not entirely vanished. The German U-boat crews were experienced, cunning, and ruthless. They had been tracking Allied convoys for years, using intelligence gathered from long-range reconnaissance, code intercepts, and coordinated patrol patterns. The Wolfpacks were formidable, but the Allied escort strategies had evolved as well. Destroyers and corvettes now patrolled with aggressive zigzag maneuvers, sonar sweeps, and synchronized firing protocols. It was a deadly chess game, with every ship move calculated to anticipate enemy action. Around noon, a brief radio alert crackled through the Hawthorne's communication system. Another convoy had reported an approaching submarine sighting approximately 15 nautical miles northeast of HX-229's current location. Lieutenant Commander Atwood immediately called a strategy meeting on the bridge with his senior officers. Charts were spread across tables, plotting the positions of their convoy, the previous night's Wolfpack attacks, and the latest submarine report. Each decision was critical. Misjudgment could expose the convoy to attack from multiple angles. Elias was present as an observer, his keen understanding of U-boat communication invaluable in interpreting what the faint signals might mean for their current route. The tactical discussion highlighted the fragility of the operation. Atwood proposed maintaining a straight course to minimize confusion, but senior officers argued for immediate zigzag maneuvers to avoid presenting a predictable target. They weighed the benefits of speed versus security, and the final decision reflected both: maintain a moderate pace while executing irregular zigzag patterns coordinated with escort ship positions and keeping sonar sweeps continuous. For the crew, it was a tense compromise, but it worked. The convoy continued forward, largely unseen and undetected by any lurking U-boats. Late that afternoon, the Hawthorne detected faint sonar echoes again, this time nearer than anticipated. Elias moved quickly, verifying signal patterns and sending immediate alerts to the bridge. The sonar operators, working in tandem with radar readings and visual observations from the Crone's Nest, identified multiple underwater contacts that suggested U-boats were repositioning in an attempt to flank the convoy from starboard. It was a textbook demonstration of Wolfpack tactics: attack from multiple directions simultaneously, creating confusion among the escorts. The challenge was immense, but the coordination among the Allied ships, combined with Elias's early warning intelligence, allowed them to adapt quickly. Depth charges were readied once more, this time with greater precision. The destroyers adjusted speed and heading, creating overlapping coverage zones designed to discourage any U-boat from approaching the defensive perimeter. The corvettes moved into position to intercept any vessels attempting to break through the defensive shield. The tension aboard every ship was palpable. Crew members had become acutely aware that one misstep could result in catastrophe. The combination of sonar readings, radar pings, and visual spotting formed a fragile shield around the convoy, giving the merchant ships a chance to continue unscathed. As evening fell, the final U-boat threats were either neutralized or forced to retreat. The convoy had successfully navigated the most dangerous section of the North Atlantic for this crossing. Sailors, exhausted by constant vigilance, allowed themselves brief moments of rest, and officers took stock of damages. Remarkably, no ships had been lost, and the cargo remained intact. The operation had been a success of immense strategic importance. Not only had lives been saved, but essential resources for the Allied war machine had arrived intact, sustaining military and civilian needs alike. In the days that followed, the story of HX-229's survival spread among naval circles. The role of Elias Warren, though understated in official records, became a subject of private commendation. His decision to amplify and interpret German communications had provided early warning, enabling a coordinated defense that preserved the convoy. While regulations were clear about the risks of unauthorized equipment use, the outcome left no room for reprimand. It had been decisive, innovative, and courageous. The surviving U-boats returned to base, reporting the failure of their attack. Naval intelligence later examined their movements, revealing the effectiveness of the Allied convoy strategies, the improvements in sonar detection, and the critical role of early warning systems. The battle became a case study in naval academies, highlighting how a combination of human intuition, technical improvisation, and tactical coordination could turn the tide in seemingly desperate situations. For Elias, the events of that February crossing became a defining moment in his life. He continued to serve aboard the Hawthorne and other vessels, maintaining his reputation as a meticulous, courageous, and innovative radioman. His story, once confined to whispers among crew members and officers, gradually emerged in post-war accounts and historical analyses as an exemplary instance of individual initiative saving countless lives during one of the most perilous periods of the Battle of the Atlantic.
Ultimately, the survival of convoy HX-229 was a testament not only to the bravery and skill of those aboard the escort vessels, but also to the unpredictable and often heroic impact of individual action. A single radio man, breaking rules out of necessity, had provided the edge that allowed a convoy of 54 merchant ships to traverse the deadly waters unscathed. His decision, though risky, exemplified the combination of instinct, skill,